Very long, but I do want to say just a couple things. You know, as the Undersecretary of the Navy, I pinch myself every day. This is, without a doubt, one of the greatest jobs on the planet. I just feel blessed to be here. But some of the things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis are not all that fun, and I'd like to give you an example. You all probably heard the ACMAC talk yesterday. The Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps talked about moving about 10,000 Marines off the island of Okinawa and redistributing throughout the Pacific. And one of the islands we're going to send them to is the island of Guam. Now, I think many people in this audience have probably been to Guam. How many people have been out there? Well, if you go out to Guam, you don't hear a lot of birds chirping. Why? Because of the brown tree snake. Now, the brown tree snake is a voracious predator, and it goes after all sorts of birds. And one of the responsibilities of the Undersecretary of the Navy is to make sure that those brown tree snakes don't break off the island of Guam and proliferate throughout the Pacific. So I say, okay, give me the best experts in the world on a brown tree snake. Bring them in. Let's talk about this bad boy. And they come in, and I say, okay, how do I get rid of the brown tree snake? Sir, feed them Tylenol. That was my reaction, too. I thought it was a joke. But no, if you feed the brown snake Tylenol, that critter will die. So I said, okay, sounds like a great plan. How do I get the Tylenol into the brown tree snake? Sir, we're not the experts to answer that question, okay? Bring in all of the people who know how to get Tylenol into the stomachs of the brown tree snake. So they all come in and say, sir, this is how you got to do it. You take a bunch of mice embryo, you inject them with Tylenol, and you parachute them into the trees. You can't make this stuff up. You know, a lot of you have a lot of stressful jobs, but I'll tell you, waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, worrying about the casualty rate of the 1st Mouse Parachute Battalion is really rough. So as I said, when the Secretary said, hey, Bob, would you like to go up and spend a couple days and spend some time with John Christensen and the wonderful faculty and staff and the people who enjoy the Navy the most, I said, of course I would. Of course I would. And it's just been a great couple days. And to me, there's been kind of 5 big themes. Next slide. First one is, you should get a sense that the 21st century security environment is going to be fundamentally different than anything that we've had to deal with in the past. I think you got that, in a sense, through a wide variety of speakers. Second key theme is we probably need a more sustainable grand strategy. I think that came out loud and clear yesterday. Third is that managing our relationship with China is going to be one of the key aspects on whether or not we will go into the 21st century and have a peaceful and cooperative century, one in which both China and the United States can grow together. We're on the leading edge of a robotics revolution. Believe me, we know that. And finally, we believe that the Department of the Navy's strategic concept and organizational construct is really well aligned to all of these 4 problems. And that is why, despite all of the challenges of the budget that we have, we are relatively confident in our future. Next slide. Now let me take you through this. So these are just some of the things that I pulled out. I mean, Ian Bremmer was just unbelievable. The panel yesterday afternoon with Barry Posen and Andy Basevich and Hugh White, just unbelievable. But the 21st century, there's going to be many more actors that we have to deal with, without question. This isn't, and it doesn't have anything to do with America's decline. It has to do with a lot of other rising powers joining the community of nations and having their own agendas. The rise of the different. I think Ian said this brilliantly, that the poor nations that are rising up think differently than the way we do and have not bought in fully to the rules-based order that the United States has operated under over the last 5 decades. I thought the Renaissance nationalism quote, I pulled that down from Barry Posen, is exactly right. A lot of people used to think about the nation-state going away. I don't see it. The nation-state is still central to the globalized economy, and nationalism truly will be an issue that we deal with throughout this century. Rising powers have little experience in dealing with or solving these international problems, And two of the things, the reason why I love coming to the Current Strategy Forum is you get to hear from Abigail Disney and from Dr. Avery, and you say, look, you got to think of these problems in a different way. It truly is different. And that is why the Naval Postgraduate School, I'm a graduate of the Naval Postgraduate School, Freudian slip, but the Naval War College truly is the home of thought inside the department. Our allies are distracted, and the U.S. may, and I underline the word may, be less willing to shoulder the complete burden of managing the global system. These were two quotes that I pulled out. Global stuff is not happening the way it used to. Ian called it the G0. And creative destruction of the global geostrategic political environment. Man, I think he's right on. So the 21st century is going to look a lot different than the past. And Dr. Rogers, history is a guide, but can also be a danger. We really have to think through these problems in creative ways. Next slide. Now, economic competition is going to be key. It's going to be a key national security imperative. And this quote comes from Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton's speech, which I thought was quite remarkable, and Dr. Brimmer referred to it, and I wanted to show it to you. Only now our great challenge is not deterring any single military foe, but advancing our global leadership at a time when power is more often measured and exercised in economic terms. Everywhere I go as the Secretary of State, I see countries gaining influence less because of the size of their militaries and more because of the size of their economies. And this is a quote directly from one of President Obama's speeches. We seek the security of our nation, allies, and partners. We seek the prosperity that flows from an open and free international economic system, and we seek a just and sustainable order. The reason why I spend so much time talking about the world trading system is regardless of your political persuasion, you want trade. It helps. So that is why looking at the access to the oceans is so critical to our strategy. Next slide. Now, you heard this yesterday afternoon from at least two of the speakers, Andy Basovich and Barry Posen, that we probably need a more sustainable grand strategy. Barry Posen called it liberal hegemony. I call it global meliorism. Walter McDougall, a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, called global meliorism the socio-economic and political cultural expression of an American mission to make the world a better place, and the assumption that it is our duty to reach out and do so. And I would say that that generally has been our grand strategy on both sides of the aisle, from both parties for the last 25 years since the end of the Cold War. Madeleine Albright said, look, if you have to use force, it's because we're America. We're the indispensable nation. We see farther. We stand taller. This really motivated both the Republican and the Democratic parties, I would argue, for the last 25 years. Next slide. It's expensive. It's very, very expensive. And it's expensive in a number of ways. We talked about the war-to-peace ratio. This is the last 25 years has definitely been the most military active period of our history over a sustained period of time. It flowed directly from our grand strategy, and we have done it willingly, but it's extremely expensive. Next slide. Now, no one is talking about America pulling back. This isn't isolationism. It's not about managing America's decline. I totally agree with Dr. Liebert yesterday afternoon. It's not about managing decline. It's about adjusting to this challenging new security environment. And we seek solvency with power to spare. I thought that was just a beautiful quote and a good thing of what we're trying to do. And you can see these are just quotes that say, look, we don't want to give up our military superiority and we don't want to stop being the indispensable nation. But it's going to be harder. People may not listen to us as they have before. We have the G0. We have to shift from G0 to what? We want to cooperate with countries like China and Brazil and Russia and all of our other allies around the world to get to this situation where we have a rule-based international order. Next slide. Military power is definitely going to be different in the next 10 to 15 years. You know, after we pulled out of Vietnam, we didn't have a major campaign for another 15, 20 years. When we overuse our military might or fail to invest in these complementary things like our economy, we're going to overuse our military. So this is a rebalancing. It's a rebalancing. It's trying to get to a more sustainable grand strategy. Next slide. Now, Dr. Liebert said yesterday afternoon, hey, it's only 4%, less than 5% of our GDP. This really isn't much of a burden. Well, I thought what Barry Posen said is right. The first rule of strategy is that all resources are scarce. In 1954, when Eisenhower came aboard, 16% or so of the GDP was being spent on defense. He wanted to balance the budget and have a sustainable long-term competitive strategy to confront the Soviet Union. Deficits were projected to reach $56 billion by 57. 56 billion, man, I lived in those worlds. We had war taxes back then, imagine that. There was great pressure from the American people to reduce the war taxes. We had permanent statutory programs. We had granted aids to states. We had veterans benefits, only consumed 18% of the budget, but it was a big problem back then. Our non-defense discretionary programs consumed another 12%, and we were spending a lot of money. We took a 40% cut to become more sustainable. We need to cut a little bit on defense. No one's saying we need to cut a lot. Well, we'll see if that happens. Next slide. And this is what's different. This is what's different and why we have to, this is totally different. We have to get our economic house in order. As I said yesterday, I firmly believe in my heart that both Republicans and Democrats know we have to address this issue. There's a big debate on how to do it. That debate will play out through the presidential election and then next year in Congress. If we do not address this problem, then the 21st century looks a lot worse for all of us here in the audience and for all free peoples in the world. Next slide. And polls suggest that people on both sides of the aisle say, look, we're spending too much money on defense. This was a poll that just came out. It's very sobering for all of us who are in the national security business. So it's not going to be like, hey, wow, if the Republicans win the election, there's going to be this huge increase in defense spending, or if the Democrats win the election, they're going to raise defense spending or keep it steady. There is going to be pressure to continue to draw down. Next slide. So all of us have to be aware that if sequestration hits, it's going to make it very, very difficult. My own view is sequestration will not trigger, but we still may take some further cuts. And what makes me feel good is in those type of environments, you have to prioritize what is really necessary, and if you have the right strategic concept and organizational construct, you're going to win in those type of environments. Now, managing our relationship with China. I purposely did not mention the word China yesterday in my speech. China's rise is the greatest geopolitical shift in history. That was from Hugh White, which I thought was another brilliant exposition on how people in the Pacific look at this competition. It's another great reason why the current strategy forum is so important. China is definitely intent on becoming a great power. China will have a great navy. They will have a great navy because they believe themselves to be a great power. Why are they going into space? Why are they buying aircraft carriers? These are symbols of what they believe to be great powers, and they want to be able to compete with the United States or Russia or the European Union. They want to take their place. And it's on its way to surpass the United States as the #1 economy in the world. There's a lot of uncertainty about whether or not that happens, but a lot of smart people think it's going to happen. This is going to be fundamentally different. So managing this relationship is going to require very adroit statescraft, as Ian Bremmer said, and a lot of economic statescraft and economic statescraft. Now, I pulled this out, the question. I had a question today that said, hey, we're pivoting to the Pacific. Doesn't this mean China? This is what Secretary Panetta just said at the Shangri-La conference. I know that many in this region and across the world are watching closely watching the U.S.-China relationship. Some view the increased emphasis by the United States on Asia-Pacific as a challenge to China. I reject this view entirely. Our rebalancing effort is fully compatible with the development and growth of China. Indeed, increased U.S. involvement in this region will benefit China as it advances our shared security and prosperity. China also has a critical role to play in advancing security and prosperity by respecting the rules-based order that has served the region for 6 decades. With leadership comes responsibility, and the United States welcomes China's peaceful rise as a responsible global power. Now, what Barry Posen and Dr. White and Dr. Basevich said, and Ian said, look, that's going to be some hard ways because the Chinese don't necessarily see the rules-based order in the way we do. So it will require adroit statescraft. But our rebalancing in the Pacific should not be seen in any way as a direct challenge or, as Dr. Rogers said, an automatic assumption that this is going to be a hostile relationship. We have competition and cooperation that we're trying to work with this country. And if we are right, inshallah, we're going to have a very peaceful 21st century. It truly is a battle of persuasion on many fronts, our allies in the region and China. Next slide. We're on the verge of a robotic revolution. You betcha. Now, I don't believe that we're going to be there in 8 years, but over the next 20 years, we are shifting the focus of the fleet. And the LCS, what people don't understand, we need frigates. No, you buy frigates when there is a threat to the sea lanes. What you need is a small multi-purpose platform that supports unmanned systems. It is the first wave of a shift to a fleet that will fully embrace the robotics revolution. Next slide. Which is why we believe that as part of a national fleet, which looks at the combined maritime power of the United States, along with our allies and our partners who have a stake in free trade, moving across the oceans, and use their navies in that very way. We will operate forward to help preserve the peace, protect our interests, our allies' interests, and global interests, and we will provide access when necessary. We are a Navy Marine Corps that is built for war. When the Strategic Air Command in the Cold War said, what should be our motto? You know, so you took all the Air Force generals and they said, and so Curtis LeMay goes, our motto is going to be peace is our profession. It is? And he goes, put ... at the end of that. You have peace by ready to go to war. So I totally echo what Admiral Hunt said. You know, the United States Marine Corps reads John Lejeune's birthday message every year. And if it was up to me, every time a Navy captain took command of his ship, he would read the same thing that Commander Ernest Evans said when he took over the USS Johnson in 1943. This is a ship that's built to go in harm's way, and I'm going to take it there. And anyone who doesn't want to follow me, then get off the ship right now. Hoorah. Or Captain Williams in 1917. The front is collapsing. The Germans are breaking down the front. He comes up to the front and the French officer says, Captain, you must retreat. And the captain says, retreat hell? I just got here. That is the Navy that we're building. That is the Navy that will preserve the peace by operating forward. No better friend, no worst enemy. That's the way we think. We are the best in the world at expeditionary operations. We're the best in the world at creating partnerships with our allies. We're the best in the world at disaggregated and distributed operations. We're a guarantor of access. I know there was a big debate inside some of them. Some of the things I showed yesterday, these places. Yeah, how is the Navy going to protect the container gateway? How is the Navy going to protect the landings for cables? Those are debates we have to have. But what we believe that the Navy Marine Corps team does is protect access, freedom of navigation through the oceans. That's our wheelhouse. And the other parts are part of the joint force and our national strategy. We're going to a total force battle network where counting ships no longer tells you the true power of this fleet. And we're getting platforms with air and sea interfaces that allow us to use second stage robotic systems, which will lead the way to the robotics revolution. When you have a strategy, a concept, and an organizational concept like this, if things come down, we will be forced to prioritize as a department. That's when you find out what's really important. And when you have a strategic concept, an organizational construct, and people like the Navy Marine Corps has, we will do okay when those type of debates occur. Next slide. Now, I know it's late. I told you I would stay on this stage until I get the last question. I will be happy to do so. For those of you who want to leave, I know you have a lot of different flights, and you need to get out of here. Before I go into questions, I'd like to do just two things. Next slide. For the graduating students, many of you who aren't here, from both the United States Navy, I mean, not in this room. You might not be here either. Bravo Zulu. This year is you'll look back on this year as one of the best years of your career. If you did not leave here feeling more fulfilled and more excited about the future, and about the future of the Navy Marine Corps team, and about the future of our allies and how we will operate with them, gosh, I hope that you have a reconsideration. So very, very good job. Bravo Zulu. Second thing, good luck. And never forget that you are going to work with leaders like this, and you're going to lead the best people on the planet. And finally, fair winds and following seas. Next slide. And for all of those who supported this current strategy forum, from the Secretary of the Navy and me, I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'd like to recognize two people, Mike Sherlock and Karen Sellers. Mike, if you want to stand up, is Karen here? And the leadership of both John Christensen, you know, he tells a different story. I mean, it's an alternate history. You know, it was I that learned so much from John when he was there. Every time I see him, he's walking around with a book. Every time he spends so much time thanking each one of our speakers, tying it into the history, tying it into this wonderful, wonderful institution that Admiral Luce built. John, we're just so proud of you. And Ambassador, geez, all of the things you're doing for the staff, please convey to all of the faculty how much I appreciate everything they do. So with that, there'll probably be a stampede for the doors, but I will welcome your questions.